Hello, people. Welcome to the reception, episode 2. Today, I have with me two amazing people, two guests, actually friends and also brothers. I would call them brothers. We've been through a lot together. We've, I think we spent nearly the past like 6, 7 years together since I moved out here in the States. On our reception, the goal is really to share stories around family, around businesses, around navigating your way, in a new place, like, when you're abroad as an immigrant. And who better than, to kick things off with Carl and Saka. In a minute, I'll let them introduce themselves to our guests. But in the meantime, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Car, Ghana's fastest growing online car rental marketplace, giving you the freedom to go places. If you're in Ghana, check out Car. Visit whoopcar.com and find your choice of car to rent for whatever the occasion, or whatever your needs might be. So first off, I would like to turn things over to my guest here today, starting with Carl. If you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, your profession, your background, anything that you'd want our guests to know.
Okay, so I'm Carl. As Yusif stated, known Yusif for quite a bit. We pretty much went to high school together and a bit of college too. So we've known each other for a long time. Background wise, I have been in the States for a bit. I believe this is like my 19th year or whatever. In terms of what I do, I'm into multi-unit management, and I have my own personal businesses too that I do as well. So in a nutshell, yeah, that's who Carl is. Obviously, as we talk more, we'll dive into, a lot more different things and details, and we'll get to know each other a lot more. But in a nutshell, pretty much that's who Carl is.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl. I'll pass it over to Saka, my boy Saka.
Yeah. Same here. I've known you for about 6, 7 years.
Yep.
So as you know, I go by Henry. Some people call me Saka. I've been in the States for about 11 years now. I'm into cybersecurity. I've been doing cybersecurity for the past 7 years now. So I can call myself an expert, cybersecurity. So yeah, that's pretty much about me.
Awesome. I think we can jump right in. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is just a platform aiming to create a community where people can actually learn from us, from the everyday people like us, with our careers, with our background, with our family, with our goals, with our ambitions, and just being able to share our stories, for other people out there to see how we can inspire people out there. Kicking things off, I wanted to dive a bit into, career and entrepreneurship. I know, Carl, obviously you did mention that you have, businesses. Yourself and I actually do run a business together. So I just wanted to deep dive a bit into that, speak a bit more into your background, both you and Saka. You both have pretty diverse, professional backgrounds. I know, Carl, one of your strongest areas is in sales. And Saka, as you mentioned, cybersecurity. The first question I had for our listeners was, what key lessons have you learned in your careers, right, that you believe are universally applicable, regardless of your industry? So regardless of whatever industry you find yourself in, right? What are some of the lessons that you think you have learned that has actually made you very successful in your respective fields?
I think the biggest thing for me is, discipline and consistent. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's being in sales, which pretty much that's what I really jumped it off for. It's being consistent, right? Obviously with sales, you have, with the kind of sales that I do, obviously I manage a group of people. But the biggest thing is that you have to be example as well, right? So staying very disciplined, staying consistent, teaching the team what to do, and consistent, obviously following up with them as well. But the most important thing too is that you just want to, the goal is to help everybody elevate, right? I mean, I think the biggest thing in any form of business that you run or whatever you do, I think if your mindset is making people around you better, in the long run, obviously that makes you better too, and it's actually a lot rewarding. So, but the biggest thing I would say that got me to where I am today, it's being very disciplined, staying consistent with what I'm doing, and just pretty much just keeping my head up. So that consistency is very, very important.
Yeah. I think I picked up two things from there, right? Discipline and consistency. And I think that's something that really, really resonates with a lot of people, right? If you hear stories of like a lot of like this, successful people in the world, like, the Jeff Bezos and, the big, tech giant companies, a lot of them talk about their stories, and those two things are the things that you tend to hear a lot more, right? Discipline and consistency, and also like doing what you love, right? Having a passion for what you're doing. And to have a passion is not enough sometimes. So you need to have the discipline to chase that passion. Right. But I think those are like two key great, takeaways from you. And Saka, how about you?
So just like Carl said, discipline is very, very important. Aside that, too, what makes you successful in any business, right? I believe it's also communication. Trying
Right.
to better communicate and understand the business. What do you call it? The business? The language of business. Do you understand? Yes, communication is very, especially in our field, right? You need to be able to communicate with the clients. If you don't communicate with the clients, there's no way they would understand where you're coming from. So communication is very key. And I also second what Carl said, discipline. Discipline is very, very important.
Right. Right. I mean, I think discipline is one of the biggest things. People, I mean, in my experience, I think a lot of people get a little bit um, extremely comfortable, over time when they keep doing the same thing like over and over and over. So it does take a lot of like discipline to keep you in, what's the right word to use, like to kind of like keep you on track, right?
Right. Sure.
Yeah, because without discipline, you it's easy for you to lose track of like whatever your vision is, whatever your goals are, um, and whatever you're pretty much like driving towards in life. Yeah. So three things I think I picked up. So there's communication, there's discipline, and what consistency. And I hope our listeners there do see the value in these three key components, and it's something that they can actually draw a lot of like inspiration from, and try to like apply that in their everyday lives. And so the next question I had to go around, Carl, I think as a business person, someone who I know you're into quite a number of things, like there's the Papa Fuel, which is
Right.
more of like the real
CEO.
estate, the the real estate space, and obviously we're both into Wuppertal. I know you have some other things on the side. Just very curious, what was the biggest leap of faith you took when you were starting out, right? Especially like trying to get into like the real estate space, and what advice would you give to anybody who wants to consider something similar? And then for you, Saka, I think for cybersecurity, how has the evolving tech landscape impacted your career? Because technology is extremely dynamic. There's always something new out there. Things change every time. And how have you actually approached your work? Thinking of like how things have changed over time, and how has that impacted your career, and how have you approached things and maneuvered your way through your career? Carl, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and I'll get started. So I think the biggest leap of faith for me is having to obviously work for somebody for a long time, and I still do, right? And at some point we've all had conversations that we want to do our own thing, be our own bosses and all these different things. And but obviously you're doing something that you're doing well, you're making money and all that stuff. But the biggest thing is that you want to challenge yourself and try something different. So I think for me, getting to real estate, it was a huge thing because pretty much everything I had saved, I had to I put into real estate, right? So it was in the time I got into real estate, real estate investing is when the market was not really that stable. So, it's a huge, you're just hoping that it works out, right? Because obviously at that point, people were losing homes and all these different things. People couldn't pay their rent. I mean, it was just tough, right? So when you talk about investing in that aspect of the business, it was very difficult. But one thing that I did believe, I remember I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and we're talking about it, and I'm like, well, I understand there's a lot of different things going on and all these different, whatever it is. But the biggest thing is that I'm a different person. The energy I will bring to it is totally going to be different. So I really don't care what's going on in the world and whatever the noise is and all these different things. The energy I'm going to bring to it will be different. So I think getting into it, yes, obviously taking a leap of faith, but I also believe in myself heavily. And I knew regardless of whatever I will face, whatever problems I will face, issues or whatever it is, I was going to overcome it because I wasn't going to give up, but it was everything I had saved. So my first property that I invested, I put quite a bit of money down, and it was literally all my savings from working and all these different things that I did. And, obviously it worked out. So I was able to build from one property, two properties, three properties, and three, four, and all that. But, I think the biggest thing is, what we had stated before when we started was being disciplined, right? So I was very disciplined, right? I was very consistent with it. And also I believed in myself that I was going to make it work regardless of whatever is going to be thrown at me. And it wasn't, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was easy. It wasn't easy, the first year, I think it was good until, so I obviously, like I said, invested in my first property and I rented it out. The first 6 months was great. And then, it was a 1 year lease and, the other 6 months she lost her job, right? So obviously she couldn't afford it. So I had to work with her. But remember, the mortgage still had to be paid regardless, right? So,
Yeah.
but, working with her and all those different things, it worked out. But I think the biggest thing is just knowing the energy and knowing who you are and not giving up. And I think in any business that we do, even if you work for somebody or whatever it is, you work for somebody, you learn from them. I think that's the biggest thing that people do forget that, whatever you do, you always learn from whoever you're working with. You take that idea and obviously run with it. So, you got to learn from somebody. But, it was a tough one in terms of making that decision to put all my investments in it. But it worked out. It worked out. So sometimes I believe that, for you, the only way you can learn is make mistakes, right? That's
Yeah.
the only way you can learn.
Right.
Is to make mistakes, and then you learn from those mistakes, and you take it to the next level. So, just and that's pretty much how it was for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think starting anything is in the initial stages is always very scary, right? It's there's a lot of like unknowns as to
Right.
whether it's going to work, it's not going to work, and then having to like invest. And investment is always not just about money, right? It's about your time,
Your time. Yep.
your mental fortitude, like trying to think strategically about like what you're trying to do and how it's really going to impact you. So I totally agree with you. It's that's I mean that's why you need to have a leap of faith in what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. And to your point, like you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in like like being consistent and believing in like what you're doing, whatever that vision is, right? And following through because you already have a vision, you have something that you're chasing after.
Right.
And something that I also sort of like align with or sort of like see myself as pretty similar to like Wopeka when I was starting out. It's
Mm-hmm.
I threw everything I had at it. I had no idea what I was doing, to be honest. Being a pharmacist and having spent most of my life in the pharmaceutical industry, car rental is obviously not something that was in my industry in any way. It's a totally separate like industry. But something you said that really struck home a lot was, when you're working for somebody, you're always learning. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was a matter of like all the things that I had learned working for a multinational company and how do I apply or bring those lessons into creating something, for myself or something outside of like having to do it for someone else. Like how do I bring that knowledge and that skill set right to build something else? Yeah, I mean, and you never stop learning wherever you find yourself, whether you work for yourself or whether
Mm-hmm.
you're working for someone, you're always learning. you're always making mistakes and you're always learning from those
Right.
mistakes. Yeah, totally. That's a great one. Saka, over to you.
Yeah. So in terms of business, right? Personally, before I moved to the States, I started a business, right? I had an internet cafe. Now, how did I get into it? So I had finished uni. I wanted a job. I wasn't getting one. I was like, you know what? I need to find something to do. And at that time, internet wasn't that popular, but then there were a few internet cafes around. So I looked at my neighborhood and I was like, yo, like there's no internet cafe here. And then we do have a
Mm-hmm.
shop in front of our house.
Right.
So I was like, okay, maybe I could set up an internet cafe. And at the end of the day, I could also make some money, get access to the internet, right? And
Mm-hmm.
be able to maybe use it to develop something for myself. So then I started my internet cafe with just my laptop I had at the time, and then one other desktop that we had at home,
Yeah.
you know, and then I connected the internet. So I put a signboard there. I was surprised. People started coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Then guess what? I took a loan from my mom, who was in the States at the time. I was like, okay, can you send me some money because I need to buy more computers? So I bought more
Mm-hmm.
computers and then I started the internet cafe. But interestingly, right, when I started the internet cafe, I didn't know anything about computers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whilst I was in Lagos, there was this guy, there was an internet cafe. Um, there was an internet cafe there, right? So the guy that used to work there, I called him and I was like, yo, I'm trying to set up an internet cafe. Can you help me? So this guy came home. And then when he came, instead of him setting up the computers, right? He was there chatting with me, telling me about things that happened in school whilst I had left, And I was like, why is this guy not connecting
Catching
all
up with you.
he's trying to catch up. Like, why is
Right.
he not connecting all these computers?
Right.
So I think he came around 9. And then around 3, he was like, yo, let's go get something to eat. And I'm looking at him like, yo, I have about 4 or 5 computers here. Why did
Yeah.
so
The
anyway, we
main
went
task has
out.
not been achieved.
It's not been
I
achieved.
know. So we went, we ate some fufu, and then we came back. And guess what? Within like 30 minutes after we came back, this guy connected the whole
Mm-hmm.
computer. And then he took all my money basically. So I was like, yo, how can this guy use like, 30 minutes to set up all these computers? So I decided
Right.
to learn on my own, right? So after he left, I started YouTubing, Googling, and that was around 2009
Hmm.
or so. I started doing the research and I started learning. And then guess what? Now, whenever there was like an issue, I had to like troubleshoot it myself. And the cafe ran for I think for like 4 or 5 years before I moved here, right? So in
Mm-hmm.
business, sometimes you don't, there's something called the fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
We don't know what to
Mm-hmm.
expect, right? We don't know what to expect, so we are kind of scared. But the most important thing is for us to what? Take a leap, a leap of faith,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very surprising. Once you start a business, right? People will start coming in to come and give you ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
That is
Some of
true.
their ideas, some of them it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
but others to have your interest.
Yeah.
It's like you pick and choose. You choose the best ones. So that has been my business. In terms of the cafe. When I moved here to, I started teaching. I mean, I went into cybersecurity, and then I started teaching. I started with one student, and then by the time I had been in it for like what 3 or 4 years, I was having at least 10 to 15 students every month.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's all about us, taking the step. Now, in terms of career, right? What helps me in my career, right? So I'm into cybersecurity now. I think the most important thing you have to do is to get a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Mentor is very important. I have a Nigerian friend who is kind of like my mentor. So in terms of like what I want to do, he was the one that guided me into it, right? So mentorship is very important. If I need anything, he helps me. He's a lecturer at the university. He got his master's, he referred me. I took the same class and got my master's too. He's a lecturer there. I'm thinking of going into lecturing. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like you need that person to be able to what
Guide you.
your hand and guide you
Right.
when you're in a career. It is very, very important to get a mentor, right? Now, if you're into IT or any other field, I feel like what you can also do is to join like a professional organization, right?
Right.
So if you're into IT, there are organizations like Saka. When you join, they have events. Sometimes you go there, you meet people,
Right.
so they can give you ideas and all those things, right? Another thing I do personally is I try to read like tech news like every day,
Right.
right? So every day, let's say in the morning, before I log into my computer for work, I might go to websites like Apple News, Tech Radar, and all that to just get myself abreast with like emerging technology or
Right.
advancements in technology. So those are some of the things I do in order to what succeed in
Mm-hmm.
the career.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
absolutely.
valid.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. And like to your point, it's to be consistent, right? Part of being consistent is being ahead of the game, like wherever you find yourself, right? And knowing what is happening. So staying up, like keeping yourself updated, keeping yourself informed in your area of like expertise. That really is something that I don't think a lot of people do it, but I think it's something that drives home and something that you know personally, I also would encourage like anyone or everyone, regardless of like your career. It doesn't have to be in cybersecurity. It doesn't have to be in tech, like wherever you are. That's one of the things that you can do. Find a community, like you said, a group that you can be a part of. Like you can network, you can learn, and also mentorship. I think mentorship is huge. I think I've only had like a mentor like once, like personally. Um, no, actually, I've had two mentors like in my career, and I think that was for me the first mentor I had was very helpful. I think she was someone that actually really helped me get into like digital marketing, which is what I do in the pharmaceutical industry. And if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have even started with the car. I probably wouldn't even like in the States, that's what I do. Like I probably wouldn't have found like a career having moved over from Ghana and knowing fully well that you're in a different country and probably your background, your school certification and all that could be limiting, in a new country and all. But I think having a mentor really, really, really is absolutely helpful. Now, speaking of business, I know today, since yesterday or this entire week, this guy that has been trending, I think we've all been talking about him, Richard Amar,
Mm-hmm.
and he happens to be Ghana, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of you
He's
guys are
he's actually
That you
from
see,
Jamestown ahead. That's
Jamestown.
what that
that you'll be
that's where I'm from too.
Any of you are related to him in any way, but I mean, obviously he sprang out. I have never heard of this guy up until like just a few days ago, right? And it's very interesting to hear some of his like interviews about like business and all of that. But like it's at the same time, right? I think there's a lot we can learn from him, obviously. But the question I kind of had about it is, do you guys feel like this whole, event that he had for his 40th, right? Is that something that you think puts a lot of pressure on young people, right? Young people who are trying to like figure things out, right? Young people who are trying to build a life for themselves, like a career for themselves, like looking at someone at 40 and saying, wow, this guy has done so much for themselves. And how about me? Like what is going wrong with my life? Where did I go wrong? And we've all taken different career paths. Obviously, we've all started businesses, But I think there's a lot we can learn from him. But at the same time, the question is like, do you think this gives a lot of pressure, or do you think this is something that obviously his events could have been managed entirely differently if he's someone who really wants to inspire, the youth out there? Any thoughts?
I think obviously when you make money, however you want to spend it, that's
That's
you.
that's your business,
But I do think that's your business, But I do think everybody is different. I think
right?
there's people out there. I'm the kind of person that would never hate on what somebody's doing, or I wouldn't say that, oh, look at what he's doing with his money. Maybe if I had, I'd do the same thing too. I don't know. But
Or you do
I
worse.
think, oh yeah, probably do worse. But I think the biggest thing we got to look at it is, for me, as somebody who likes business so much, it's like, regardless of whatever it is, I don't know this guy's background, but from what I've read so far, he owns a lot of businesses, right?
Right.
He's into a lot of different things, right? So, I don't care what the perception is or whatever it is, but the guy owns a lot of businesses, and obviously, something he's doing something well. So for me, I take it as motivation, right?
Right.
I take it as the sky's the limit. It's not about having one or two. Like sometimes, jumping into businesses again, like my dad. My dad sometimes will tell me I'm involved in way too many things, right? He's like, you are involved in way too many things. Every time I call you, I can barely talk to you. You have your personal job, you have this, like, and I'm like, dude, like, what do you expect? Like, that's what it is. But I'm looking at these, the amount of businesses this guy has. Like,
It's
so for
wow.
me, it is motivation, right? It
Right.
is motivation. And I've heard, I've listened to quite a bit of his interviews. So it is motivation for me. The sky's the limit. Obviously he's doing it big. The only thing I'll add to it, like I said, and I don't know the whole story, but or what he's done that has not been showcased, right? There's
Right.
probably a ton of stuff he's done, maybe helping people out that's never been showcased. But for me, I just feel like if I had that kind of money, yes, I'll have a bit of fun and I'll throw myself a nice party for my 40th. But I think there's some issues in Ghana that needs serious attention, right?
Attention.
Like
Yeah.
you take it to situations like in our hospitals, like our main teaching hospital, which is Kolebu, and all that stuff, right? And it's like people are literally sleeping on the floor and all this, So I would, if I will obviously help. But like I said, I don't know. He's probably doing it, and
Right.
that is not
Right.
being
Right.
showcased, right?
Right.
So we
Right.
don't know that. But like I said, for me, it is motivation. I'm not gonna hate on somebody's success or how somebody is spending their money.
Yeah.
Yeah. His story is inspiring. I think first time I heard of him was I saw this trending video of this microfinance company that if you take money from them and you don't pay, they will come to your house like 4 a.m., knock at your door. Sometimes they will even write
That's
on
what
your
I'm.
wall
That's
that
what
you
I'm
owe
talking.
them, you know. So you can tell he's somebody that doesn't joke with his money. Do you
Hmm.
understand? But I thought it was. I mean, he celebrated it too grand.
Right.
In terms of bringing all these celebrities all over Africa. Yes, just like Carl said, it's his money, but you can tell the vibe was not even there. I mean, I watched some of the videos.
Right.
He invited Ramsey Noah. Ramsey Noah was sitting at the VIP lounge on his phone, kind of like he didn't
Right,
care. I'm here to take the money. You
right,
understand?
right.
So don't force it. I
Right.
think he
Right.
was trying to force the relationships he has with the celebrity. Let them come to you. You don't have
That
to
is,
force
yeah.
them.
That I agree with.
You understand? I mean, it was a party of the year.
It will be the most talked
It
about
it would definitely be the most
party.
talked
Yeah,
about, big time. But everybody's different. Like
yeah,
I'm the kind of person. I'm big on energy, right?
yeah,
So there's some people the people that know me for a long time, they'll probably tell you that Carl sticks to certain people. He doesn't talk to other people. That's who I am. Like I'm that kind of person. Like I'm huge on energy. If I meet somebody and the energy is not right, trust me,
yeah,
we're not talking. Right? If I walk in a room and then the energy is not there for me, the vibe is not there, like I'm out. That's the kind of energy, that's the kind of person that I am. So if I'm having a party like that, trust me, everybody coming is people that I mess with, people that mean
yeah,
something to me. Like, and I'm not just gonna have names, certain people come on just because of whatever it is. Like, because they are
Hype.
popular
yeah,
celebrities or I'm trying to hype it up. No, I don't want that
Yeah.
because that's who I am. Like, I am big on the people that I surround myself with. So if it's not right, I don't want you around me. That's all it is. But obviously, he's different, right? Like, he wants everybody around him. And he's paying all this money, but it's like, not everybody really cares about you. And Saka,
yeah,
you're right. Like, so watching some of the videos, some people obviously were having a great time. I mean, obviously they
yeah,
would free food, free drinks, whatever. But there are some people too, they were just sitting,
yeah,
right? Like they were not really into it. You can tell that they are definitely there for a check.
yeah.
That's
It
what it
was, it
is,
was
So
more like an
yeah,
event.
yeah, it was more like an
An
event,
event.
right? So, but that's how he chose to celebrate his day, which is okay. We just talking
Yeah,
about it. I wouldn't, that aspect now. Everybody coming is people that care about me. I care about them.
Personally.
We know each other personally. We have a good time. That's it. But that's who I am. Like I don't care about having, all my life, I can tell you, man, I probably never had more than 10 friends. Maybe when I was coming up, maybe 2 or 3. And then as we got older, maybe we get into it. Some people piss me off. I piss them off. I cut them off. But what it is that as we are growing, I just want to have a certain circle that, I care, you care, like a very tight knit. And I prefer it like that. But some people just want to be known and want to be, they
Yeah,
literally want
you
to
want to
be
be out.
like, it's not me. Like, I prefer people not knowing about me.
Mhm.
Like, I just want to walk in the room like, who is this dude?
Yeah.
That's what I want.
And that's what I think the old him was better than the new him.
Yeah, because
The old him, he
now
was
you
still
open up the
rich.
floodgates. He
Yeah,
was still rich,
he was
Yeah.
still
right? Now
rich.
you
He had
open
his
it, you
Rolls
totally
Royce, he had
open it
his
up. Yeah, he
cars,
was living
and nobody
extremely
really
good.
knew him.
New. Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
knew,
Yeah.
And
right?
I
Yeah.
would
So
prefer that.
now,
Yeah.
right now you have all eyes on you, right? Now you have all eyes on you. People will start digging and digging and digging. It's like, dude, you
Yep.
don't even want that. But maybe he felt like it's time. That's what I said. We don't know the guy's intention. Maybe he felt like, because he's been, I was, watching one of his interviews. He said he made his first million when he was 27 years old. So the
Yep.
guy just turned 40. That's 13 years ago. He could have made a lot of
Yeah.
Yep.
noise too when he first made his million, but he
Yep.
never did. He was still quiet, still laid back. So I don't know why now he wants to like be known, but he probably has his intention. So, obviously we can't really say much about it. But I always say this, right? Like this, and then the funny thing is that like I was saying something to my daughter this morning. We're talking, I said, Melania, the loudest person in the room is always the weakest one. And then she's like, "Well, Daddy, you allowed." I said, "But there's different form."
Types of loud.
I said, I said, Melania, you are absolutely right. I said, I'm not talking about yelling and screaming and all those different things, but I said, you're right. I said, I'm talking about, in terms of like success and stuff like that.
Right.
People that are extremely successful,
Yeah.
but they don't make a lot of noise about it. But like I said, to each his own.
Like in Ghana, they have this saying in Chi words, "Sikampedidi."
You can't pay it, right? Our famous ex-president did say that. Good morning. Yes, you can't pay it. That is true.
No, but,
Hey,
but he has, like you said, he has a lot of businesses. I
Yeah.
was also following him, and I realized he invested in chicken something.
Chicken man.
chicken man, yeah.
Pizza
Pizza
man,
man, chicken
chicken
man.
man.
He's like the main investor,
Hmm.
Yeah.
in that
And
business.
he actually brought the Burger King franchise to Ghana. He was
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
that
He
brought
has
the
the
Burger
Burger
King.
King
And like,
franchise, so
yeah,
he's not
yeah.
doing bad. I mean, I
No,
don't know
no, of
whether
course
the
not.
Burger King in Ghana is making a lot of money, but
Well, the Burger King they had to add the Burger King they had to add jollof to the menu because
yeah, but the question is the clientele, right? How many people will go to Burger King?
Yeah.
You understand?
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Because
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
but
Ghana,
but
the
you can tell
disparity is
he's
huge.
making. I mean, he's making money from his microfinance. So
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, he
he's
has
definitely doing something.
he has quite a number of businesses, and to Carl's point, I think you can get motivated from him.
mm,
Whether it's a lot of like acquisitions, because I saw a list of like businesses that this guy is into.
Yeah, man. And
Looks
has
like
stuff in Africa too, like
yeah. So
different places in Africa.
he's doing a lot of stuff, and like obviously if you have multiple streams of like income, that's that's always something that you can never get away from, or like something that would definitely set you up in life, like for success, having as many streams of income as possible, right? Yeah, I mean, I just thought I'd throw that out there, but that was such a fun conversation to have, and hopefully
no,
our listeners can also draw a bit more from that. Switching gears a bit, I wanted to ask about like we all immigrants, right? We all came from Ghana, different times, in our life, and I was just curious about like each one of you coming here at the time you got here, building the careers you've built, right, for yourselves, and finding your feet, right, being an immigrant and trying to figure your way out, navigate your way, right. What is one of the unique challenges that you've both faced, right, and how did you overcome them? right? Being a foreigner, having come from Ghana, because there's always a lot of like different misconceptions about, you know, when you travel, your degree doesn't mean anything. Like there's this funny misconception, right? Or when you travel, you're gonna end up doing like minimum wage jobs. Like you're not like, unless you go to school. If you don't go to school, like, you know, you can't really make it in other fields or in other areas as far as like careers go. So it's like it sets a bit of a limitation for people. And I was just curious to learn. Hopefully, I'm guessing also a lot of our listeners will be interested in learning how you guys figured it out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would say, one thing about this country, the US teaches you to be humble, regardless of who you are. I mean, I'll say that some people might be lucky, but for most of us, if you come, you have to start from scratch,
Mhm.
and, by starting from scratch, you have bills to pay. If you're lucky enough to have somebody to sponsor you, then fine. But because you have bills to pay, you have to what? Start from scratch. You have to find minimum wage jobs, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
the good thing about this country is, and that's what we call the American dream, right?
Yeah.
So if you're able to start from somewhere and then you are able to work your way to the top, you
Mm-hmm.
just have to give yourself like a goal, right? Okay, maybe five
Mhm.
years time, I want to be able to get my degree, right? So
Mhm.
what do I do? Maybe start from a community college whilst working, and then progress from there.
Right.
And so that's one thing about this country. But one thing I believe in this country is that if you set up your mind to do something, you will be able to achieve it once you go for it. Yeah.
I mean, that is very true. America fortunately gives us opportunities that, and people might be upset when I say this, but our country's not going to give us that. Because, when you take a look at Ghana and how many people are educated, or how many people have college degrees with no jobs, I mean, it's mind blowing. And it always has to be with, they probably don't know somebody, or, they don't have the
You
right
need to know
connections or
someone.
whatever it is to get certain opportunities. You need to know somebody, and that's how Ghana is built. When you take a look at America, America is not built like that. It's all about you, the efforts, going back to what Saka said in terms of having a goal, to get to when you want to get to. When we all came, my goal, my dream was always to be a doctor. When I left Ghana and I moved back to the States, a lot of people don't know this, but I did 2 years of med school in America, and I realized that it wasn't for me, which is fine. Of course, my parents got upset when I decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. And a lot of people don't know this because I was always the kind of person that I really didn't put my business out there.
Right.
And I prefer not to do that because, I don't want nobody in my stuff. But yeah, I didn't want to, I did 2 years of it. I decided I'm not going to do it anymore. But then my dad was like, one thing my dad told me was like, I don't care what you're going to do, but you got to figure this stuff out because, your whole life, this was what you were literally raised to be, right? Most of you guys, we all Africans and we know how the African culture is. But, so I had to figure out myself. So I had to sit back and think about, okay, what do I want to get into? What do I think I'm good at? And I realized that, one thing about me is I'm not scared of anything. I've always had confidence. I can approach people. I was like, let me get into business management. So I got into business management, got into sales management, and then, worked my way up to get into the position that I am in my company right now. But, it's that goal, right? So even though the medicine thing didn't work out, I figured something out, and I had to work extremely hard because first of all, I had to prove to my dad that I can make it without going to med school, right? Um, but going back to it, that's the opportunity America gives you, right? Like,
Right.
if you set your mind to it, and as Saka stated, have a goal and you work towards that goal, you achieve something, and you can look at yourself like, man, I did it. Like, without anybody's help or whatever it is, I worked extremely hard and I achieved it. Versus where we are from, it's totally different. So coming to the States, and we've run into a lot of people that moved from Ghana, came over here, pretty much maybe doing their masters or degrees or whatever it is. And once they come in, they have a lot of them are extremely shocked with how things are. But it doesn't
Yep.
matter. It's not how you start. Like I always tell people, I'm like, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. You got to pick these jobs when you come. We've all worked at fast food restaurants, right? We've all done those things, right? And like I stated earlier on this podcast was, you got to learn, wherever you go or wherever you work, you got to learn from them, right? And you got to take that knowledge and build upon and do something for yourself. So you got to start somewhere. There's nothing wrong with getting down and dirty, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, we in our country, Ghana, we feel like we are too good or whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with getting down and dirty. And I tell you this, if you own a business, and one of the reasons why your business was extremely successful, if you can get down and dirty with your team members, they respect you a whole lot more, right? So I think having that mindset, get down and dirty when you come in, have a goal, set a plan, and just work towards it. And the sky's the limit in America. That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And to both of you, your points, like you obviously have to start from somewhere. We all started from somewhere when we got here. Obviously, like coming from where we're coming from, having different backgrounds. Like, I mean, I got here when after working in like the pharmaceutical industry for like over 8 years. Haven't had all the experience that I had, but obviously moving here, I knew, hey, I'm starting all over. I'm starting from scratch. Didn't matter what I had to do. And to your point, you got, I think one of you said it, like you have bills to pay, right? You still have to live, and you definitely have to start from somewhere. And then one other thing you said, Carl, about our parents, African parents, about you studying medicine, and it's like this is what they expect of you. I had a similar situation. Obviously, like pharmacy was never like my first choice. I didn't even dream about it. I never even had a conversation with my dad about it. I was literally at home, and he got back from work one day. This was when we were all trying to like apply for schools and stuff. And then he got back from home. I had already applied to tech, and then this guy shows up and he's like, "Oh, you're going to read pharmacy." I was like, huh? Like, what is pharmacy? Because I always had this mindset that I see people in a
Like
pharmacy
the
store.
stores.
That is that is what pharmacy is all about. It was like, no, you're going to read pharmacy, and some way somehow he managed to change my course. He managed to get it done. It
Yeah.
was again like it was never something I throughout my life growing up I thought about or I dreamt about or I was excited about, but it kind of got thrown at me. But at the end of the day, I got through it. It created like a good foundation for me in my career. It gave me a lot of exposure. I was able to learn a lot throughout like my career as well in the pharmaceutical industry, which I think has helped me, become a bit more versatile in understanding like other industries and how I can bring those like learnings or skill sets like into other industries. So now like I don't limit myself to like even when I'm looking for a job, I will never limit myself to like pharma. Right. I can work. I feel like
Right.
I can work in any other place, and that's one advantage. Yes, so that did give me that foundation. So to your point about like African parents, sometimes like you don't know what they're doing or why they're doing what they're doing,
Yeah.
but
Right.
later on,
No, but most of our parents, they want us to be, have a career, to be safe. They want us to be good. So they feel like, being a doctor, being a nurse, it's like a guaranteed career. It's like guaranteed success. And that's what they want for you. They don't want you to, just, let's say, do any course, right? And then it's now that you're going to look for, a career. But compared to, that's why they like the lawyers, they like the pharmacists, they like the nurses, they like the doctors.
professional.
Yeah. And
So
then, and
they always push for that.
right.
So,
Right.
so, so we do
Yeah.
understand them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, when you take a look at how, obviously how Africa is built, right? When you take a look at it, it's coming up, we are not raised to grow up to be entrepreneurs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right? We always raised to you go to school, you get your degree, master's, if you want to go get a PhD, go do it, and then you go work for somebody, right? It's like that is how it is. Sometimes I don't blame them because they don't. That's what they know. That's what they grew up on, right? That's they didn't have that exposure. Like, okay, you can really empower people to actually, start their own businesses and build on it. So I don't blame. Sometimes I don't blame them as much because I start to stated is like I remember my mom when my mom was like, "Why don't you want to do it anymore?" Blah blah blah, and she was going and she's like, "You can even practice when you were 70 years old, 75 years old. You can." It's always there for you. It's guaranteed, right? And I'm like, I get it, but what if I build stuff and I can, so. But it's not exposure that they have. So they obviously they mean well, and what they have it is. But yeah, that's about it. That's
Yeah,
about it.
and when you look at the whole immigrant thing too, right? So when you move from Africa, usually the person you come to meet, what they are doing is what you
Hmm.
tend to do. You understand? So if you come to
Correct.
meet somebody in healthcare, you might end up doing
Yeah.
healthcare. If you come to meet
Correct.
somebody doing IT, it's gonna be the same thing. So that
Right.
also plays a part. Is whoever hosts you or whoever you are with or the friends you meet, they are the ones
Hmm.
that can influence what you do as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. That's true. That is
Yeah.
very, very.
I mean that's really huge, and I think that's really big. It's something I think a lot of people can learn from. I think it's always your circle, right? The circle you surround yourself
Hmm.
with. Like I came here, you guys were were and have been my circle like since being here, going to like 7 years now, and it's something that I'm super like grateful for because I think I had a lot of like influence. I had a lot of like motivation, seeing you guys and what you guys are doing gave me a lot of like push and drive that, hey, you know what, like the opportunities are here. I know Carl used to say this thing, Charlie, in the US, as long as you're hardworking, there's no way that's you can't make it. You just,
Right.
as long as you're hardworking, you're ready to grind, like there's no way, like unless you're lazy.
Right.
If you are lazy, then you definitely go hungry. Like then you really won't be able to find your foot, so your feet. Like, and I think that's something that's very important for a lot of people who are trying to like figure out what to do with themselves when they get here, like how to navigate, where to start from. Obviously, you always have to start from somewhere, but I think the key thing is like finding the right circle to surround yourself.
That is true. That is true. Always, always find people that are doing better than you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And you learn from them. That makes you better. I always say this, like, when somebody's doing well, even if you're in a group and somebody's doing well, be happy for them,
Yeah.
right? Be excited for them. There's no need to hate, like some of our African brothers, yeah, I'll say this. Some of our African brothers, they just love to hate, right? It's just that enviness, that hate. What's the point, right? If people are doing well, be extremely happy for them.
Hmm.
Ask them what they're doing, learn
Yeah,
from them, right?
yeah.
Don't hate and don't sit back and just always talk shit and just hate. It's not okay. Just because a white man doesn't do that,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes we don't want to say it. We don't want to say the white man doesn't. You take a look at all these white people. This surrounded. You know what? Why we've really taken it to a little. Let's take it a bit. Let's go there a little bit. The Spanish people, right? One thing about the Spanish people, they stick together, right? They help each other out. They stick together. They're not envious of what anybody's doing. One Spanish person gets a job somewhere, he brings his whole
All the time.
cartel.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's what it is. But we Africans don't have that, and it's pathetic. So when you're in a circle and your friends are doing well, be extremely happy for them, and always surround yourself with people too that are doing better, and you can always look up to them and all that. But yeah, be very happy when somebody's doing well. Totally.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So two last questions, I think, then we can wrap up on this episode. Hopefully, looking forward to bringing you guys back again. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of feedback, and there's a lot of insights that you guys have both shared here today. So the next question I had was looking back on your journeys, right, so far, looking like flashback. What are you most proud of, and what are your aspirations for the future? Like, what is the one thing you're most proud of? Like, whether it's been business, whether it's been family, whether it's been your career, what is the one thing you're most proud of, and what are you looking forward to in the future, in the near future? Who wants to take that?
Somebody want to go first?
What am I proud of? I think Carl should go first. Because
I mean,
I feel like
he,
there's a lot to be proud
You're
of.
proud of. I mean, like,
right.
so you could mention any.
Yeah, family is very important. When I see my kids, it gives me some pride. When I see where I am today, I'm proud of myself. You know, yeah, I think there's so much. When I look at my career, I never thought I was gonna be into cybersecurity. When I finished school, I did my national service at the Ministry of Health, so I was looking into getting into like a government business,
Right.
and then I worked for SMSGH, now Haptel, so that was when I believe my career started, gearing towards IT, so I was working for Haptel, and then I set up an internet cafe, but then when I moved here, I went into healthcare, and didn't do anything IT or cyber, for about 3 or 4 years. And then all of a sudden, I was able to get myself into the IT again, and now, I can basically say that I'm an expert in my field, So when I look at the journey, it's not been easy, but I'm proud of myself for not giving up, because there are times when you can ask yourself, you sit down, you're like, is it even better to come to the States, or should I have just stayed in Ghana? And I have a friend, and I tell him, yo, like, even if the US tells me, hey, here's a gun, go and shoot for us, I'll do it, because, they've given me opportunity that I feel like, I wouldn't have gotten in Ghana. And then he will basically tell me that the way you are, you will still be rich in Ghana. No, but I'm like, I could, right? But it's not as easy. This country gives you a lot of opportunities that sometimes we don't even take. We get so much opportunities that, like, when I got into the cybersecurity field, there were times when I got like 2, 3 jobs, and I could only do one. So I had to let 2 jobs go.
Right.
But when I was in Ghana and I put in like over 500 applications, the only one that called me, the only one that called me was Glow. I went for 2 rounds of interviews and never got a job. But then you come here and then you put in applications and then you get 2, 3 offers. So I'm just proud of myself for not giving up. Let me say it that way. I'm hoping for the best in the future, but yes, I'm proud that I never. And another thing I'll say is that I've also been able to help the people around me too. To get to where they are. Based on my knowledge. I've been able to help a couple of people.
Right.
To and I had this friend of mine, right? So I was able to help her get into IT. And then one day I was there and she called me and she was like, "Do you know what you're doing is a work of God?" And I was like, "What do you
God's work.
mean?" Yeah. He said it's God's work because, it's God's work is not just going about preaching, and telling people to, repent and all those things.
Yeah.
It's also about helping people. Some
Right.
people will get this knowledge and will not want to share it. Yes, they are giving me something small for helping them, but the blessings that I'm gonna get from it is gonna be amazing because if she gets a job, she has a better job. She's able to send money to
The
her
family.
people back home. They're gonna say thank you, God bless you. You know, and she believes that those things are going to touch me. So when you look at all these things, I'll say that's where I'll say that I'm proud of myself for not giving up, and also for helping people around me to also get to where I am.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, that's definitely beautiful. I think for me too, it's a very similar concept. Obviously proud of, my family, my daughter, my girl, just proud of them. For me to be able to provide and, give my daughter the best, I think that's huge. Be able to put her in positions for her to be successful. I think it's big for me because who would have thought, right?
Hmm.
And also, like I said, I'm into business management, which is, my, the main thing that I do in terms of work. And, I have quite a bit of employees, people that report to me in total about, quite a number. And for me to see my people, take care of their families, buy homes, and it's just wonderful. And going back to what Saka stated, it's a blessing, right? And it's
Hmm.
not blessing comes in so many different ways. It's not about me, going to preach the word of God that makes me religious
Yeah,
or that makes certain things happen for you, but the people that you touch, right? The lives that you touch and the words that they speak onto your life, it goes a long way. So having to do that, I'm truly proud of it, because sometimes I'm like, man, the little boy from Ghana, when I was growing up, I was little too, very little, just like my mom. So glad that I really shut up, because if I was like 5'1", 5'2", it would have been a struggle with my loud mouth. It would have been so sometimes I'm like, God, I thank you for making me tall. But anyway, yeah, we've come a long way. So for us to be able to put people in positions to do well, and it's just a beautiful thing. So yeah, very, very proud of that. And obviously we're not gonna stop. We can't stop. And the goal for me is to keep elevating. Keep elevating the stuff that I do, the people around me. And that's all it's about. We're not gonna stop. So far as we have life, there is always hope, and we're just gonna keep staying focused and keep grinding.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, I like that from both of you. I guess being able to like touch other people and impact other people's lives like beyond their imaginations. And to your point, Saka, it's like you're literally doing God's work, right?
Right.
Which is good. Like, and I'm sure a lot of people probably come back to you like the way the lady and told you how much you've been a great influence on her life. I'm sure you get it a lot. It's certainly something that anyone who finds themselves in like your positions, like you are, I believe should obviously be thinking of like, how do I help people? How do I make an impact? And that's just a good way to carry yourself. Like a good strength to have a good like character to have. I like that, and I hope our listeners are really going to learn from this as well. Very, very super inspiring. The last question I have too, so that we can wrap up, is a pretty fun, interesting question. If you could swap like jobs for a day, right? What would you be most excited about or most terrified about? I mean, if you could swap what you're doing today for something else, and you do swap it for that thing, what would you be most excited about, and what would scare you about that job?
That's a deep one, man.
If there was
That's a
something else
deep
you,
one.
you would have wished that you were doing.
You know what? I would say, growing up, I'd always wanted to be a pilot. I don't know why. I don't know why. But when I was until I went to secondary school,
Mhm.
when I went to Achimota, that's when I realized that okay, it looks like that dream is
It's
off,
not coming.
because they are not offering it in college. No high school is offering anything like that. But sometimes I look at pilots and sometimes I wish I was in their position. I wish I had had that opportunity because
Mhm.
sometimes I believe that okay, probably if I was born here or I'd come here earlier,
Mhm.
maybe I could have got into that field. I mean, thankfully I have a friend who is like a pilot. He sometimes I go in the air with him. He allows me to sometimes control the airplane in the so I mean I would say that I've tried it. But what is terrifying about that job is that it takes a lot of discipline and paying attention to details. Because
Hmm.
before we go in the air, he has to make sure there's gas in it. There's like basically he has a checklist
Mhm.
that he has
Hmm.
to go through each and every one of it. And sometimes I ask myself, would I have the time? I like things quick. You know,
To
will
remember
I have the
everything.
time to
Or
go
the
through?
patience.
And the checklist is like almost like 30 something.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would I have the patience and the time to be able to go through each and every checklist? And that's where maybe I think I'll be scared. Maybe if you're a commercial pilot, you would have people do that for you. So you might not be that scared. But being a private pilot and you have to do those yourself, that's where
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
will say that's where my fear will be. I've been in the air with him for about 3, 4 times. I've enjoyed both. My wife is like, "Are you not scared?" I'm like, "No," but it's yes, it's something that I had always wanted to do. So yeah, even though I'm not a
Yeah.
pilot, I have a pilot that we go with his private plane.
You get to experience your dream
My
I
dream,
somewhere.
my dream. Yeah, that's true. I think for me, I think I'm always fascinated by, the people like in the Air Force, right? So I would like to, have a day in the Air Force. And then, going back to what Saka said too, like when I was a kid, I always talked about wanting to be a pilot. But then when I was, for some reason, my mom would always shut it down. No, you're going to be a doctor. You're not going to be a pilot. so, so that drew, so anyway, but I would love to have that experience in the Air Force, uh, maybe in the aviation aspect of it. I'd like to experience it, see how it is. Uh, I mean, I think, sometimes when I bring it up, people are like, well, you can do it because you're you're very disciplined, very detailed. But I would love to experience it. And I think the other thing, too, in terms of biggest fear is sometimes for some reason, I was like, so what if something happens and I lose it all? How is it going to be? Right? How is it going to be if I lose it all? But then one thing I always tell myself, I'm like, Carl, if you lose it all, you will figure it out. You know what I'm saying? You will
Yeah.
figure it out. So I think that is sometimes I think about it, but I always tell myself I'll figure it out because I just don't give up. So, that's what it is.
No, that's great. I think for me it was more of like growing up and watching action movies and
Mm-hmm.
seeing all this like action figures, like people we grew up with, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, Jean Claude Van
Rambo.
Damme, and
Rambo.
they always had movies, like where they were like the main characters and they were like in an army. So I always had this funny idea that I was gonna join the army.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the army was like big deal for me, all because of these movies and
Right.
holding a gun and having those experiences. Like I always had this like adventure type of like thinking or mindset with the movies and all. So I mean, if I had one job I would swap, I think would be like being in the army. And speaking about what would terrify me, obviously, is if I have to go to war, if I have to go to and actually fight.
And you might
I,
not, come
I
back.
might not.
Henry's gonna do it for America.
I do it for America,
He'll,
man. They
he'll
should
do
put
it
me in
for
front,
America.
front line.
At
I
least,
go shoot rough.
at least they'll bring you. If anything happens to you, they'll bring you back.
They bring you
They'll bring
back.
you back in your casket and have the American flag over it.
Your family will be, at least you'll be
They'll be
honored.
proud of you. You'll be honored. You'll be
Yeah,
definitely honored. But
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, this was absolutely fun. It was super insightful. Hearing your stories, each of us our stories, and learning a lot from each of us, and also again, absolutely inspiring. I think the everyday people would definitely learn a lot from this, and I'm just about to like wrap up with you guys. So before we go, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add or share based on the topics and the questions we've discussed.
No, I think as you stated earlier on, obviously this is insightful for all of us. We've been friends for a long time, but sometimes when you have these deep conversations, you get to know each other a lot more better. Sometimes you feel like you know each other, but you might not really know, because there's always some things that might be out. So it was definitely good.
Absolutely. Great learning. Great learning. Learning a lot about each other as well. And obviously glad that we could share this, with anyone who gets to listen to this podcast. Other than that, I'll say thank you very much, both of you, for joining. I know it's almost a little late right now, but
Hmm.
really appreciate you
I
guys
know.
jumping
This,
on.
this is this is my first podcast, by the way.
Me too. Me too. I mean, me too. This is my fan podcast, so there's more to come.
I know, right?
Absolutely. Like I said, like definitely would want to like invite you. Obviously, this would evolve over time. Other topics, other conversations with other people on this podcast. Like looking to invite different guests. And also have so many different like conversations around these types of like topics. And I know we couldn't touch on a lot of things as well, so I definitely want to bring you guys back again because again, I feel like there's a lot people can always learn from you or take away from these conversations, and these are really great conversations to have that I don't think a lot of people get the opportunity to do this on an everyday basis. I really, again, absolutely appreciate you guys jumping on. I'll say adios for now, but I know we're going to be in touch.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.